Now, China has built a vast infrastructure network of road, rail and airports across Tibet to connect it to China. But the speed and scale of the projects only really accelerated since 1999, when China launched its Go West campaign. And in September, Beijing inaugurated a high-altitude drone testing facility near Xiquanhe in Nagari Prefecture at over 4,300 meters above sea level, complete with a 720-meter runway. So, Sikyong, I want to ask you, what does this transport network, what does the drone testing facility in Tibet, what does this mean for China, for India, for Tibet?
We always talk about, and which is true, there's a great threat about Taiwan. Taiwan being the spotlight. It could be the island or the nation where China might invade or there might be conflict. But I always fear that, and I say this, that India could be, equally, targeted by China. Primarily because to be number one in the world, you have to be number one in the region. To be number one in the region, you must make sure that there is no number two, or number two should be distant number two, right? And in Asia, if you look at, India has that makeup demographically, economically, to be the number one, number two. So just to make sure that India is fully contained, all this infrastructure developments taking place, railway line from Golmut to Lhasa to Nyitri, from Chengdu to Nyitri, and then from Xinjiang to Nyitri, and then 4-lane, 6-lane highways, and then military airfield in Nyitri. Now they're building one in Ngari, which is across, Galwan Valley, Ladakh, right? So clearly they are prepared, wars are won or lost based on, supply lines. So supply chain. So they are already preparing, and they have built 300, artificial or villages across border line as well. So China is fully preparing, right? And from India's side, I always urge in India to build more infrastructure on India's side as well. So clearly they are flexing their muscle and showcasing that we are better prepared infrastructure-wise than India.
President Lai, do you agree with that assessment? It's not just defensive, it's actually offensive.
I think although China would like to be the expansionist, but right now the war talk or the attention is actually still on Taiwan and also the eastern seashore. The India to China is that I want to prevent you to be the good number two. I'm always the number one. I'm going to work with Pakistan to contain you. But about being offensive against India, I do not think China is, that is in Chinese mind. And if you look at the Galawan incidents, where not only 20 Indian soldiers lost their life, but also they are like a double the kind of number of Chinese soldiers who lost their lives. It is Chinese side. They want India to compartmentalize this issue. And it's the Indian side continue to insist that unless you deal with the Galawan issues, and there's no normalization between India and China. So I will say that the very different attitude when China facing Japan, Taiwan, for example, where everything is about sovereignty and the military will be the number one, and nothing will get normalized. But the Indian, Chinese, and attitude India is very different. So I will say that the attention toward the military is still on Taiwan, and to a certain extent in South China Sea. But India is still not even in the top two in the Chinese strategic calculations there.
Sikyong, is it also for Tibet, though, not just perhaps a greater standard of living, better transport, easier to move around, but is it, accelerating the assimilation of Tibet into China?
Yes, infrastructure, obviously Tibetans use it, but more so the Chinese migrants use it, right? And then the Chinese mining companies use it, and Chinese officials use it more. So if you have to weigh who is benefiting more, clearly Han Chinese and Han Chinese officials, and then Han Chinese owned mining companies and factories are benefiting more, because Tibet has a lot of natural resources, critical minerals, and 75% lithium reserve of China is in Tibet. 90% of rare earth of China is in Inner Mongolia, so on and so forth. So clearly, this infrastructure helps them build that as well. Now, if I may just add one point, the origin of rise of China was there's old saying that which is now popularly cited, Tibet is the palm. You occupy Tibet and go after 5 fingers, Ladakh, Nepal, Bhutan, Sikkim, and Arunachal. Why? You go after 5 fingers, he who dominates Himalayas will dominate South Asia. Not just in Pakistan. China is in Nepal, Bangladesh, Maldives, Sri Lanka. So containing India is their primary focus. Because to be number one, you have to make sure the number 2 is nowhere near. There is never going to be a good number 2. You have to make sure, like in America, to rise to become number 1. Mexico and Canada is nowhere near. No one sees Mexico and Canada as challenging. India, if you look at First World War, Second World War, why, Russia, Britain, Germany, there was contention, was making sure there's no number 2. That's why all this, wars happened. So China's biggest concern is if they went on to rise to become number 1, if there is a conflict, even on Taiwan, they have to make sure that, behind my back, number 2 will not take me over, So that way, I think, if you look at the infrastructure development, that's why they spend so much. From India's side, not much is happening. So that's why it's more offensive preparation infrastructure-wise.
Okay. So meanwhile, in July, Washington restored $6.8 million in funding for Tibetan communities as the Dalai Lama turns 90 years old. This comes as the Trump administration has slashed nearly all of the funding for U.S. aid and other international development programs. The U.S.'s Tibet policies are grounded on a few different acts, including the Resolve Tibet Act of 2024 and the Tibetan Policy Act of 2002. In particular, the Resolve Tibet Act of 2024 affirms that the dispute between Tibet and China is unresolved and urges China to engage in dialogue with Tibetan leaders without preconditions. With respect to the Dalai Lama, the act imposes sanctions on Chinese officials who interfere in the succession of Tibetan leaders. It also affirms the Tibetan people's right to self-determination under the United Nations. President Lai, let me ask you, this was significant for Trump to do a U-turn on this funding for Tibet, even though the dollar amount perhaps wasn't that great. Do you think, in our final question, can Tibet count on U.S. support, especially as they go through the succession of the Dalai Lama?
I have to say, I don't know. But at least the Trump administration about President Trump signing this act and the choose not to deny it, that means that Trump does not see the Tibet issue as a problem between him and Xi Jinping. So I think that will be the good sign. And it's not like Taiwan, where Xi Jinping took Taiwan to the voluntarily go to the Trump and demanding Trump to do something. But Xi Jinping is not bringing the Tibet issue to the Trump. So that for him to sign this also means that the United States continue to pay attention to what's happening in Tibet. I think that's also at least a good sign. Although we do not know to how much that the U.S., especially the Trump administration, would like to pay attention to the Tibet, because we do know the Trump administration basically ignore the democratic value and the human rights value as a part of diplomacy. But at least in the Tibet issues, they are willing to do something. So I think that at least that's a positive.
Sekyung, you said that Tibet is part of China's offensive strategy towards India. So should Xi Jinping, should China be more worried about U.S. support?
For Tibetans?
For Tibet,
yeah, they have always, worried about Tibet. That's why, China has published 13 white papers on Tibet. Compared to Hong Kong or Xinjiang or East Turkestan, even on Taiwan. So that shows that why they have to justify their presence 13 times means they are worried, because we have government exile, we have His Holiness Dalai Lama, and we have bipartisan support and the grassroots support around the world. So yes, Chinese government is worried. At the moment, it's true. Taiwan is the flashpoint, and it should be. But I'm pretty sure, in their discussion, Tibet issue will come up, not necessarily in the top 1 or 2, but it will come up. But I'm more worried, in Taiwan will be the issue that will come up between Xi Jinping and Trump. And we hope that U.S. administration will stay firm and then not budge towards the demand of Xi Jinping.